many other mega cities in Europe, such as you see on this map, also in Asia as well, in both East Asia and South Asia. Okay. And finally, let's talk about the internal geography of a city. First, let's define central city. Central city is basically city center with the highest density in commercial and residential land use. So that is, on this picture, you can see central city, which would depict with high-rise building and a reflection of high density of land use. Suburb, the areas surrounding the central city with lower density of urban land use. So on this picture, you can see the places that outside the central city is a blue, lighter blue, that illustrate the suburban locations. This idealized model of central city and suburban structure. Of course, we know that in real world, the internal structure of city is more complicated than just the central city and suburban division. We know the suburbs have, in general, have very close connections in many ways with the central city. You have economic connection, you have a cultural connection. People would go to central city to shop, to work, to have entertainment. But politically, they could be very different, especially in the context of the United States. Many suburban communities, politically, they are independent. Here we see a map of St. Louis, a metropolitan area. We know in the central city, you have the city of St. Louis, which is a politically independent institution, an entity. Surrounding city of St. Louis, you can see on this map that there are many patches of different colors. These patches of different colors are all different municipalities of different cities. Politically, they are independent of central city of St. Louis metropolitan area. So economically, all these places are integrated into one single entity, but politically, they are all fragmented. They are all different political entities that have their own tax base. Part of the reason is that with the growth of the central cities, many people decide that they do not want to pay more taxes to the central city to support heavy financial load of infrastructure construction. Therefore, they would migrate to the further away from the central city, and politically they become incorporated into a different political entity, into their own municipalities. Now they have their own tax base. They no longer pay taxes to central city. So for this independence in tax base, they become an independent political entity. Therefore, that is one of the important reasons for the political fragmentation in American cities. But in cities of other regions, you do not see such a level of fragmentation. So this is a very unique American phenomenon. Okay? Economically, they are integrated, but politically, they are very fragmented. And when people move out of central cities into the suburban locations, they form what we call suburban cities or edge cities, because these cities emerge at the edge of the original city. And some of the edge cities eventually become incorporated into new political organizations, and that's is what caused the fragmentation of North American cities, especially American cities. Okay. There are also the issue of urban sprawl and suburban sprawls. When people move away from central cities, they take advantage of cheap land in suburban and rural locations to build homes. That is what caused this kind of a continuous urban sprawl or suburban sprawl, and you can see that the city began to spread out into a increasingly larger areas, and with urban area expansion We also see that many small cities and suburban cities emerge at edge, and this map shows that in a contrast between the UK and the US, UK seems to have more regulations on urban expansion than in the US. Therefore, the urban expansion in UK is more paced and measured, and when communities spilling out from central cities, they still form a larger cluster. But in the US, you can really see that when a community is split out from central city, it's keep going further out away from the central city, so forming a more scattered pattern of urban sprawl and suburban sprawl than the case of the UK, where you have a more land regulation than in the US. So that gives a sense of a government, the populations does play a role in uh, in restricting the pattern of urban sprawl. So this is a chart that shows the proportional share of a population who are cities, suburbs, or non-metropolitan areas. From early days after World War II, urban areas that have cities plus suburbs, you have over half of the population, so we can call American as a urban nation. Today, between the central city and the suburb, you have over 80% of the population in the country. In addition, within suburban region, you already have over half of the population of the entire country. So today, not only we can call American urban nation, more precisely, we can call America a suburban nation because most of the urban population today actually live in suburban locations. Now, we have several models of urban form. Models of urban form is trying to come up with a structure to simplify the representation of the urban internal spatial organization. The first model we come to talk about is so-called concentric zone model. We know in the late 19th century and 20th centuries, there are some Chicago sociologists. They investigate the spatial structure of social groups in Chicago, and eventually they come up with this kind of a model to use specifically to describe the internal structure of Chicago as a city. What they found is a so-called concentric zone model. So in the city, in the central part of the city, you have a CBD, the Central Business District. Then outside you have a ring they call zone of transition, and beyond that you have three more rings. Each ring is occupied by different social economic groups. For example, the third ring is occupied by zone is so-called zone of independent workers' home. Then next one is zone of a better residence, and beyond the last zone, number five, is commuters zone. So you can really see that a different zone is occupied by different social economic groups. Poor workers, but basically live close to the central city, and then you have number three zone of independent workers home. Then you have better home zone for better residence. Commuters zone refer to those really rich people who can really afford to commute between their suburban homes and their job in the central city. So obviously, for those who are poor, who live close to central city, who are rich or live further away from central city. So each zone is occupied by different social economic groups. So this is the structure that they use to describe what is like in terms of internal organization of a big city in Chicago, and that's why it's called concentric zone model. Then some American uh, sociologists they investigate a number of different cities. They have a different opinion about the internal structure of North American cities. they proposed this concept called sector model. They said that the internal structure of city, instead of concentric zone, what you can find is you have a CBD, and from CBD you have extension of different edges coming out from this CBD. For example, you have this sector that they call uh, transportation sector and industry. This is number 2 here, the purple color. Then you have number 3 is low-class residential area. Number 3, they are close to the industrial transportation zone because they're kind of noisy and dirty. Land is cheaper. That's why a lower class resident was built in this zone, adjacent to the industrial and transportation zone. Then further away from the transportation zone are those middle class residential zone, and opposite to the industrial transportation zone, high class residential area. So different sectors not forming different rings, but different sectors extend out from central city, from CBD. So that's why you have a sector model. Then you have two urban geographers. They look at American cities. They propose this multinucleate model, which said that within a city, you not just have a one central business district, you have more than one business center, not just within CBD, but also you could have a separate business center. For example, in this case, they see the number 1 is traditional CBD. Then you see number 7 is outlying business district. The point here is that they have more than one business center. And that's why multi-nuclear model. A city not just focus on one CBD, but you have one center to focus on. You have one traditional business center, but also you have outlying business center. And that gave this additional insight to the internal structure of the city. Also, they called out the industrial suburb. This again, the concept of multiple multi-nuclear model. This multi-nuclear model has been further developed by other scholars. You have scholars that look at Atlanta, and look at Atlanta, you call this, you have this traditional downtown, and they have several downtown. Also have a suburban downtown. You see the downtown, not just the traditional CBD downtown, but also there are other downtown, even suburban downtown. Not only the downtown, but also you have an airport, specialty center, retail strip corridors. These are all new business centers. So this version of a multi-nuclear model go way beyond just point out that you have to have the CBD, the downtown, to be called multi-nuclear center. All these business strip, business corridor can be called new business center. And so they really call this kind of structure galactic city, like a galaxy that you have various spread out centers, not just one center, you have numerous centers spread out across the entire urban area. Then this is a model proposed by some postmodern geographers. They use Los Angeles as an example to define this postmodern city. When they come to illustrate Los Angeles, they imagine that Los Angeles is a city where you have a traditional CBD. Then as a city, the Los Angeles is a place that has become very fragmented in terms of economic class, in terms of racial group and ethnicity, in terms of sexual orientation, in terms of people's background. Therefore, this is a city that become extremely fragmented. Each particular group has their own individual community, has their own individual clusters. They separate from each other. They are separated from each other. They almost, you can imagine that this big city is exploding, break up into smaller pieces, all pieces fall into their own places, and they do not quite interact with other communities, so become very fragmented. Each community set up the barriers against other groups. That's why you have the affluent, gated suburban communities, and therefore you have very demarcated, very apartheid, very splitted, very segregated city. And that is what they come to use to define the postmodern city. Many centers, very structurally fragmented, that kind of concept that come to define the postmodern city. And the model is Los Angeles. So that is what so from the concentric zone model that is based upon Chicago to the postmodern city that is based upon Los Angeles, you can see the fundamental change in the landscape of urban development in Western country, especially in the United States. Okay. Now let's talk about this one particular current issue. We can talk about segregation in American cities. What are the causes of segregation in North American cities and in American cities? Should we do anything about it? What can we do anything about the segregation in American cities? Here I just have a series of slides that indicate some of the most segregated cities in America. Number 1 is number 10, Los Angeles. So you have this black-white dissimilarity score. The higher the score, the higher degree of segregation. Different color indicate different racial ethnic groups. And red is white, purple is blue is African American, orange is Hispanics, and the green is Asian American. Okay. Then number 9 is Boston, and black-white dissimilarity score is 67.8. Okay. Then you have number 8 here, close to us, St. Louis, number 8. And black-white dissimilarity score is 69.2. And Cleveland dissimilarity score is 72.6. And Miami dissimilarity score is 73. And Philadelphia dissimilarity score is 73.7. Chicago, again, in the context of Illinois, dissimilarity score is 75.9, and New York City, 79.1. Number 2, Milwaukee, 79.6. Number 1, Detroit, 79.6. Close to us, we know that Edwardsville, close to this East St. Louis, a community that is part of St. Louis urbanized area, not far away from us, but we know that between two communities, we see a lot of differences in terms of the trend of a population. East St. Louis is losing the population, and Edwardsville, the Glen Carbon area, is gaining population. Also, the percentage of African American population is very high in East St. Louis, but very low in Edwardsville and Glen Carbon areas. You can also see very clear contrast in terms of median housing value in two communities, East St. Louis versus Edwardsville and Glen Carbon area. Okay. Unemployment rate very high in East St. Louis, but kind of low in Edwardsville, Glen Carbon area. Median household income, you see clear contrast between East St. Louis and Glen Carbon and Edwardsville area. Percentage family in poverty, very, very clear contrast. Workforce participation for male Glen Carbon, Edwardsville, Glen Carbon areas, 72% versus 49%. Female, 62% versus 49% in East St. Louis. And mode of work commuting, mostly in Glen Carbon and Edwardsville area is using a car, trucks, the van, but in those in East St. Louis, only 2/3, and more people rely upon public transportation. And household income distribution, And this is blue is Edwardsville, red is Illinois, and green is U.S. average. So you can see that the percentage in low value areas were lower than the state and national average. The percentage in high value areas were higher than the state and the national average. This is the income. This household income distribution, and this is a this bottom is repeat. No, this bottom is Eastern Louis. Eastern Louis in the low income area, Eastern Louis is higher, way higher than the state and the national average. In high income area, is way lower than the state and national average. So that's a very different structure. House value distribution in the same way in Edwardsville is a kind of a higher than average in terms of middle income, middle housing value region, but in East St. Louis area is higher than state and national average in lower house value distribution portion. So that's give you a clear contrast. Household income rather than earnings, Edwardsville and Glen Carbon, a lot of the income come from interest, dividend, and net rental. So there's a lot of property owners that have a big financial investment, but in East St. Louis, there's very little income coming from investment and property ownership. So that's very different here. The marital status population, and in the Edwardsville Glen Carbon areas, were kind of 40% married, 51% married, but in St. Louis, 61% married, only 24% married. So you are talking about many people who are really do not really have the normal family life at all in East St. Louis. That may have fundamental influence on children. Level of education population, and here is high school, some college bachelor degree and a graduate degree, very high percentage. But in contrast, in St. Louis, very high percentage who have no high school, 30% people only have high school, and smaller percentage who have college and post-college degrees. So that's and the crime rate very low in Edwardsville, but extremely high in East St. Louis compared with state and national average. So these are the three issues that we need to consider. So we repeat this question after we see those clear examples, not only at the national level, but also we see at the local level. We look at this question again, segregation. We see a clear segregation in St. Louis compared with Edwardsville and the Glen Carbon area. What are the causes? Should we do anything about it? And what can we do anything about it? Think about these questions, answer them on the test. Finally, we have this city model of developing countries. So I try to simplify, I summarize different regional models into one single model to highlight the important features of developing countries' cities. First, the rich people live in the central city, and the poor live in peripheral region. So that is one important point. Another is to have a very inadequate housing, road, and other services, especially in small cities, and also especially in communities where poor people live. Also, you have widespread slum and squatter settlements, and that is especially in the edge of the city. In addition, there are distinct zones based upon racial and ethnic identities. Many developing countries have colonial experience. Therefore, throughout the colonial eras, there are some colonizers who brought in people of different racial and ethnic group to a particular country. Therefore, eventually, those different groups all have their own social spaces within the city. Therefore, they become highly segregated. So the segregation between race and between ethnicity is also important characteristics of developing country cities. Okay. So these are some pictures. This one picture I took in outside of Lima, the capital of Peru. These are an example of a squatter community. These land, all public land, and therefore people just from rural areas, they just come up to set up their makeshift structure. They settle there, and eventually they live there, and eventually they own the land. After they stay there long enough, they own the land, and this is the beginning of a squatter community. They come in to occupy the public land. They set up structure there. They do not actually live there. They just use the structure to claim the ownership of that land. Eventually, when there's more people move into the region that actually live, they begin to move in. They begin to rent out or even sell the land for a profit. And also over time, they also begin to build some infrastructure to provide some more urban services. So this is one picture that shows how a scatter community get started in Latin American country. Okay. So now this is the end of this discussion. Again, these are the terms, the concepts that you need to check out from the end of the chapters in the textbook. Thank you very much. See you next time. Goodbye.